Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
In 2004, he was serving as a machine gunner in the war in Iraq. 8 years later, he was a finalist for the National Book Award. A conversation with Army veteran and novelist Kevin Powers, the author of The Yellow Birds. That's next on Dialogue. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. At 17, Kevin Powers enlisted in the U.S. Army. He would eventually end up serving in the war in Iraq. When he came home, Powers went to college and discovered that he had a book inside of him waiting to be written. It would take 4 years, but it was worth it. His novel, The Yellow Birds, became a finalist for the National Book Award and won both the PEN/Hemingway Award and the Guardian First Book Award. One of the first veterans from the war in Iraq to become a successful writer, Powers has been compared to Tim O'Brien, a veteran and the author of the iconic Vietnam War novel, The Things They Carried. The Yellow Birds is set in Tal Afar, one of the places where Powers served, and focuses on the friendship of two soldiers, one of whom promises the mother of the other that he will not let her son die. That promise, as we learn from the very beginning of the book, could not be kept. The novel also delves into the psyche of a returning soldier, alienated from friends, family, and himself. Now, Powers was the keynote speaker at the University of Idaho's annual Hemingway Conference in 2014. He talked with me from our studio on the campus of the university. Well, welcome to Idaho, Kevin. It's nice to have you here, even if we're a couple hundred miles away from each other.
I'm very happy to be here. Nice to be talking with you.
Speaking of Idaho, you're at the University of Idaho during their Hemingway Conference. You are the recipient of the PEN/Hemingway Award for debut fiction. What role did Hemingway play in your development as a writer?
Well, I mean, I think for most American writers, he's a huge influence, an almost unavoidable influence. I mean, his influence on literature internationally has been tremendous, and his books were really important to me when I was young, when I was in school. A Farewell to Arms, for instance, was one that, even though it was in the classroom environment, really spoke to me and really showed me the kind of possibilities that were available to writing in fiction, to prose. So he's always been somebody who's been really important to me as a reader and as a writer.
Now there's another Idahoan who had an influence on you. You really enjoy the writing of Marilynne Robinson and the book Housekeeping in particular. She's from Sandpoint, Idaho.
Indeed. I mean, that's I think it's one of the finest novels of the last 50 years. It's just a really stunning work of art. I go back to it as often as I can just to remind myself what a person alone in a room with a piece of paper and a pencil, or whatever their tools of the trade are, what they can actually achieve. So it's something that I really cherish.
You've been writing since you were quite young, including poetry. What did that do for you as a child? Why were you so interested in writing?
I mean, I think it gave me an opportunity to ask questions about the world. And particularly when you're young, it hasn't changed all that much for me, but particularly when I was young, I had so many questions about, hey, what did it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be influenced by your surroundings? How do we interact with people? How do we understand each other? I mean, and I think I first discovered writing and reading as a way of kind of a format for addressing those questions about the world when I encountered Dylan Thomas, and almost immediately thereafter started trying to write poems of my own. It was just seemed like a different approach to the world, a different way of seeing things, of hearing the sounds of people's voices, and it's been as exciting ever since as it was that first day I picked up the book. So,
and you keep reading Dylan Thomas, don't you? You go back to it often.
I do, and as I mentioned with Marilynne Robinson, those writers and those books that have been really important to me, I do go back to them frequently, in a way, it just kind of reaffirms my belief in literature and art in general to really do tremendous things in the lives of people. So I go back sometimes just to hear that music, sometimes to revisit poems that have been really meaningful to me throughout my life.
Now, I've read that you considered yourself not a very good student in high school, and so you didn't want to immediately go on and, say, study English or creative writing in college, did you? You wanted to go into the military, and you did so at age 17.
That's true, and not only did I not consider myself a good student, my grades bore that out. It was not an inaccurate assessment on my part. So I don't know if that if that option was really even available to me. I didn't think it was. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. But going into the military did seem like a way for me to open up opportunities that may not have been there otherwise. It's kind of a path that other people in my family had taken. My father, both of my grandfathers had served in the armed forces. And I don't know if I imagine it's probably similar here, but in Virginia, the part of the country that I grew up with, it's not uncommon for people to take advantage of the opportunities that the military provides. So it felt like a really natural choice for me.
As I read Yellow Birds, it seemed almost like an homage at times to young people from small towns who go into the military to broaden their horizons and their opportunities.
I think that's true, and I think there's part of it is naivete, I suppose, but there is a kind of idealism and a selflessness that I admire, and one of the things that I wanted to look at is the way that as a whole, as a society, as a nation, we take that really honorable impulse that young people often have, and we don't always, I think, with the decisions that we make collectively, we don't always necessarily respect the fact that we have this great resource of people who are willing to make those kind of sacrifices.
Did you know going into the war in Iraq that you wanted to write about it? Did you keep a journal, or maybe you kept a journal just for personal reasons? Did you do writing while you were there?
I didn't really do a lot of writing. I mean, a lot of that was just due to the kind of, the time pressure. I just didn't really have that much time available to me. I didn't know that I knew that I was a writer. I was already writing, but somehow I felt like this was a separate part of my life. I felt like it was something that, and this may have been something that I even wasn't conscious of, but I kind of felt like I was going to put this into a separate category and go off and do something different with my life once that experience was over. I did, however, I read a lot, and I tried to, reading for me while I was there was a kind of lifeline to the person that I was and wanted to be, the life that I kind of remembered and hoped to return to. So in that respect, the written word was really important. They just weren't mine at the time.
So what happened upon returning that turned on the light switch to where you said, I'd like to write about this, even in a fictional way?
Well, it was just this kind of accumulation of urgent questions I had about my experience in my own mind, questions that I was getting from family members, from friends, from strangers who would discover that I had been over there. And as I mentioned, growing up, the way that I always addressed questions and tried to explore things that I found confusing about the world, I wrote about them. So it just seemed natural to take that same approach to these particular set of questions that I had that were so pressing.
And why did you decide to put it in a fictional form as opposed to, say, memoir or nonfiction?
Well, there are a number of reasons. One of them is, I felt like to tell the story in a way that I thought would be approachable and understandable and relatable to a reader who didn't have this experience that I had. I felt like fiction would give me the kind of, I mean, I certainly can't be objective about my experience, but I needed a kind of critical distance from my own experience, and fictionalizing, creating these fictional people and this story that has a relationship to reality, but isn't my own story, gave me the opportunity to ask questions in a maybe a more pointed way than I would have if I was just looking at my own story, and also I think it reflects my my own kind of interest as a reader, and I think for a lot of writers, we write in the forms that we like to read. We write in the forms that we respond to as readers, and that's been true for me. I've always turned to, particularly to the novel and to poems, as a reader. So I think my writing sort of reflects that. And art, all forms of art, create a space that people can enter. Experience isn't a prerequisite to participate in a work of art, whether it's a painting or a film or a novel. Art is the way that we understand each other. I mean, it is one of the ways, but for me, in my life, and I know a lot of people feel the same way, that it is the way that we can have access to experience that's remarkably different from our own. I mean, to go back to that extraordinarily beautiful book, Housekeeping. I obviously don't know what it's like to be a young woman in the situation that the young women in that book experience, but I could feel the things that they felt. I could see from their perspective, and the way that I try to approach that kind of the philosophy, that belief in this possibility of understanding each other, was by focusing on the emotional aspects of the experience. Well, it's true that not very many people have been in combat in Iraq, but everybody that I've ever met has experienced grief in one form or another. They've experienced anger, shame, regret. So I hope that by creating a story that was, in a way set in the kind of interior space of the narrator's mind and heart, that people would feel like they had access to the experience that maybe they wouldn't get just by opening the newspaper or watching the evening news.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about the title, Yellow Birds. There are no yellow birds in the book, but it's metaphorical. It comes from an army march, yes, or a cadence that's sung.
That's right, and yeah, it comes from a marching cadence that, in my experience, I think it's probably one of the most common in the military. Every vet I've met seems to know it very well, but it seemed to kind of exemplify some of the themes that I thought were important to the book.
Can you march it out verbally for our viewers?
I can. A yellow bird with a yellow bill was perched upon my windowsill. I lured him in with a piece of bread, and then I smashed his head. So it sounds a little different when you have kind of 50, 17 and 18-year-old young men screaming it at the top of their lungs. But I just felt like the inherent violence in the cadence and really the tragedy of the kind of powerlessness. I know I'm sort of delving deeply into this cadence, but I just felt like there was a lot there that reflected things that I wanted to talk about in the novel.
The dichotomy between beauty and then killing or ending that beauty.
Certainly. And that being a feature of not just the war experience, but the human experience.
I'd like you to read a passage that gets at this interior nature of the narrator and also these fractured experiences where we have to do something that just does not always make sense with what we've been taught as we grow up. Mm-hmm. He's looking at a man, and he knows that he's going to have to kill this individual.
Right. A man ran behind a low wall in a courtyard, looked around, astonished to be alive, his weapon cradled in his arms. My first instinct was to yell out to him, "You made it, buddy. Keep going." But I remembered how odd it would be to say a thing like that. It was not long before the others saw him too. He looked left, then right, and the dust popped around him, and I wanted to tell everyone to stop shooting at him, to ask, what kind of men are we? An odd sensation came over me, as if I had been saved, for I was not a man, but a boy, and that he may have been frightened, but I didn't mind that so much, because I was frightened too. And I realized with a great shock that I was shooting at him, and that I wouldn't stop until I was sure that he was dead. And I felt better knowing we were killing him together, and that it was just as well not to be sure you're the one who did it.
Was this an experience that you yourself had?
Oh, well, none of the experience in the book, align with mine exactly, but certainly, when I reflected on my experience, and a lot of the work of the novel happened with me sort of going over memories that I had and trying to figure out my kind of personal culpability for things that I had participated in, and this idea that one of the ways that we deal with our feelings of guilt is by sort of diffusing it and sharing in that responsibility. It's a kind of coping mechanism, and I wanted to make sure that idea was present in the book. The struggle of violence being almost imprinted in your person after you experience in this way, whether it's as a participant, as a witness, as a victim. It does leave a lasting mark on you, and I think that's one of the things that veterans in particular have to deal with and have to kind of come to terms with when they return.
And this book is also, in large part, about coming home. There's some very poignant sequences, I think, in there about what it's like to be disconnected from the rest of the world when you come home. And you have another passage that I'd like you to read from that I think illustrates that as well.
Certainly. I had become a kind of cripple. They were my friends, right? Why didn't I just wade out to them? What would I say? "Hey, how are you?" they'd say, and I'd answer, "I feel like I'm being eaten from the inside out, and I can't tell anyone what's going on because everyone is so grateful to me all the time, and I'll feel like I'm ungrateful or something. Or like I'll give away that I don't deserve anyone's gratitude, and really they should all hate me for what I've done, but everyone loves me for it, and it's driving me crazy." Right. Or should I have said that I wanted to die, not in the sense of wanting to throw myself off of that train bridge over there, but more like wanting to be asleep forever, because there isn't any making up for killing women, or even watching women get killed, or for that matter killing men, and shooting them in the back, and shooting them more times than necessary to actually kill them. And it was like just trying to kill everything you saw sometimes, because it felt like there was acid seeping down into your soul, and then your soul is gone, and knowing from being taught your whole life that there is no making up for what you are doing, you're taught that your whole life. But then even your mother is so happy and proud because you lined up your sight posts and made people crumple, and they were not getting up ever, and yeah, they might have been trying to kill you too, so you say, "What are you going to do?" But really it doesn't matter, because by the end you failed at the one good thing you could have done. The one person you promised would live is dead.
And of course what that's referring to, and you mention it right at the top of the novel, is that this young man's compatriot, the person he'd gone through boot camp with, didn't make it. And there's a story about how that happened and the complicity of the narrator, which I won't give away, but this anchor that people come home with, and I don't mean anchor in a positive sense, but it weighs them down.
Right.
That was important for you to get at in this book, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, I wanted the difficulty of coming home, the challenges of coming home, to be as much of a part of the story as the kind of the origin of those difficulties of the war itself. I wanted to make sure that nobody could come away after reading this book and think that the danger ended for soldiers once they returned back to the States. It's a danger of a different kind, certainly, but it's danger nonetheless.
What has been the reaction of veterans upon reading this book and talking with you? Do they tell you that it helps sum up or exemplify their experiences?
Well, I mean, I've had a variety of responses from individuals. But I think really the overarching thing that I get from veterans is that they're happy that not necessarily their story is being told, but a story from the war is being told. That people who don't have necessarily any connection to the war have an opportunity to think about it and ask questions about it and to engage with what it might be like for a soldier over there or for a soldier coming back. I think more than anything else, I think veterans have expressed an appreciation that that this space has been created for people to think about what their experience may have been like.
Well, and I was going to say this is kind of the tip of the spear in a way. There are other books coming out about experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. There was a finalist for the National Book Award, as you were, who also wrote about war experiences. So we're going to be seeing more and more works of fiction and nonfiction, I think, coming from this arena. Your book is already being compared. It's up in the pantheon now of books about wartime. It's being compared to All Quiet on the Western Front, Red Badge of Courage, The Things They Carried. How does that feel?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a tremendous compliment. It's a bit strange. I mean, I when I think of the book, I think of the time that I spent writing it in my tiny apartment in Austin, Texas. Hoping that perhaps I might be able to get it in front of one person who would want to read it. So, I mean, the fact that people have responded to it in the way that they have has been really gratifying. And if it serves no other purpose than to get people thinking about the experience of veterans and Iraqis and the kind of impact that war still has. This is not a new problem for our species, but if it gets people thinking about it and if it changes perhaps one person's point of view on war and what it does to people, then I'll feel like I've more than kind of fulfilled the task that I set out for myself.
When you look back at the war in which you were a participant, what are your feelings now, looking back?
Well, I mean, it's a complex, it as it has been, it remains a complex and fluid situation. Things seem to be going fairly well for a while, and now not very well, I think is an understatement. I think in a kind of larger political perspective, I feel like, it was something that we shouldn't have done. Now, this doesn't, in my mind, take away from moments of courage and compassion exhibited by our servicemen and women. There were, and I'm sure there still are, good deeds being done on a individual level and on a small scale. But I think on the whole, I think it provides us with a lesson of maybe this isn't the kind of first choice for us as a nation. Maybe we shouldn't immediately think that military force is gonna accomplish what we want to accomplish.
I wanted to ask you how your military service and preparation helped you as you were writing the book over a period of, I think, 4 years, somewhat in isolation, or did it not? Maybe it didn't, but.
No, I think it did. I mean, I think, one of the things that my military service gave me was a feeling that that if I worked hard at something, that if I believed that something needed to be done, that it could be accomplished, that I was capable of doing, the task that was set out in front of me. And I don't know that that kind of belief was inherent from birth. I think it did instill a sense of confidence and self-discipline that, at least for me, is a necessary part of being a writer.
You're continuing to write. You had a book of poems published in April 2014, and you're on to your next novel as well. A little bit different setting. The murder of a plantation owner after the Civil War in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
But still, maybe some themes in common, darker themes.
Right. Well, I mean, I think
life, that is.
right. That's
Yeah.
true. No, I mean, certainly, I'm interested in, and probably my experience in Iraq has contributed to this interest. But I'm interested in the way that violence and injustice affect communities, the way that people respond to those circumstances, the way that people overcome those circumstances or succumb to the kind of prevailing sentiment. And it's a way for me to look at to take this story and look at things that I think are still present in our issues that are still present in our country today. So I'm it's difficult work, and it'll probably be a little while yet before I'm finished with it. But I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to spend my working life doing this. So.
Well, I'm pleased to have
Very
had
happy about that.
yes, and I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to talk with you even at a distance. It's been a pleasure. I encourage people to read your book, and congratulations in advance on what I'm sure will be a wonderful second novel as well.
Thank you very much. I've appreciated talking to you.
You've been listening to Kevin Powers, the author of The Yellow Birds. Of the novel, the judges for the National Book Award said it was, quote, a work of fiercest principle, honoring loss while at the same time indicting the pieties of war. If you'd like to know more about the book and its author, as well as the University of Idaho's Hemingway Conference, please go to the Dialogue website. Just go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue. For Dialogue, I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for tuning in.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, become a friend on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.